The morning sun cast long shadows across the small town of Cedar Falls as Maria Santos adjusted her son's graduation cap for the third time. Her hands, calloused from years of military training, moved with gentle precision as she smoothed the tassel hanging beside his face. "Mom, you're making me nervous," 17-year-old Alex whispered, glancing around at the other families gathering in the high school parking lot. His dark eyes, so much like his mother's, darted between her intense gaze and the crowd of parents taking pictures. Maria stepped back and studied her son. The black graduation gown hung perfectly on his tall frame, and, beneath it, she knew he wore the crisp white shirt and blue tie they had picked out together weeks ago. But what made her chest swell with pride wasn't the ceremonial clothing. It was the quiet strength in his posture, the way he held his head high despite everything they had been through together. "Sorry, Nijo," she said, using the Spanish endearment that always made him smile. "I just want everything to be perfect for you today." Alex's expression softened. "It already is perfect. You're here." The simple words hit Maria harder than any physical blow she had ever taken during her 12 years as a Navy SEAL. She had missed too many important moments during his childhood. School plays where other mothers sat in the front row while she was deployed in places she couldn't name. Birthday parties celebrated over video calls from military bases thousands of miles away. Parent-teacher conferences attended by his grandmother while Maria was training recruits or conducting operations that would never make the evening news. But she was here now. Retired from active duty for 2 years, she had made a promise to herself and to Alex that she would be present for his high school graduation. Nothing would keep her away from this moment. "Let's go find our seats," Maria said, placing a protective hand on Alex's shoulder. "Your abuela is probably already inside, saving us the best spots in the house." They walked together toward the main entrance of Cedar Falls High School, joining the stream of families flowing through the double doors. Maria's trained eyes automatically scanned their surroundings, a habit that had become second nature during her military career. She noted the exits, counted the security guards, and assessed the general mood of the crowd. Everything seemed normal, festive even. Parents chatted excitedly about their children's achievements, siblings complained about being dragged to another boring ceremony, and grandparents wiped away proud tears before the event had even begun. Inside the gymnasium, hundreds of folding chairs were arranged in neat rows facing a temporary stage decorated with the school colors of blue and gold. Balloons bobbed from chair backs, and a large banner reading "Congratulations Class of 2024" stretched across the back wall. The air buzzed with anticipation and the low hum of countless conversations. Maria spotted her mother, Elena Santos, sitting in the third row, exactly where she had promised to be. At 72 years old, Elena still commanded attention wherever she went. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and she wore her best dress, the navy blue one with small white flowers that she reserved for special occasions. When she saw Maria and Alex approaching, her weathered face broke into a radiant smile. "There's my graduate," Elena called out, rising to embrace her grandson. "Alex, you look so handsome. Just like your father did at his graduation." Maria's chest tightened at the mention of David, Alex's father, who had died in a car accident when Alex was only 8 years old. David had been a teacher, gentle and patient in ways that perfectly balanced Maria's intense military discipline. After his death, raising Alex had become both Maria's greatest challenge and her most important mission. "Thanks, abuela," Alex said, leaning down to hug his grandmother. "Did you save Mom the aisle seat like I asked?" "Of course," Elena replied, patting his cheek. "I know your mother needs to be able to see everything that's happening. Old habits from the military, right, Mija?" Maria nodded, grateful for her mother's understanding. Elena had never fully comprehended the details of Maria's work as a Navy SEAL, but she understood that her daughter's protective instincts ran deeper than most people's. The aisle seat would allow Maria to move quickly if needed, though she hoped this would be a peaceful, uneventful ceremony. Alex left to join his classmates in the designated staging area, and Maria settled into her seat next to her mother. The gymnasium continued to fill with families, and Maria found herself studying the faces around her. Most were familiar from various school events over the years. There was Mrs. Patterson, whose daughter Sarah had been Alex's friend since elementary school. The Johnsons sat 2 rows back, beaming with pride as they waited to watch their twin sons graduate. Coach Williams, Alex's former basketball coach, waved from across the aisle. But Maria's attention was drawn to a group of men in the back corner of the gymnasium. They wore dark suits that looked expensive but somehow out of place in the casual atmosphere of a high school graduation. Their posture was rigid, military precise, and they seemed to be watching the crowd rather than participating in it. One of them, a tall man with graying temples, kept checking his watch and speaking into what appeared to be a small communication device. "Do you know those men over there?" Maria asked her mother quietly, nodding toward the group. Elena followed her gaze and frowned. "No, I don't think so. Maybe they're relatives of one of the other graduates? There are so many families here today." Maria wasn't convinced. Her instincts, honed by years of high-stakes missions, told her something was off about these men. They moved with the controlled precision of trained operatives, and their attention seemed focused on specific individuals in the crowd rather than the general festivities. She made a mental note to keep an eye on them as the ceremony progressed. Principal Martinez took the stage and tapped the microphone, sending a squeal of feedback through the gymnasium. The crowd gradually quieted as he began his opening remarks about the achievements of the graduating class and the bright futures that lay ahead for these young adults. Maria tried to focus on his words, but part of her attention remained fixed on the suspicious group in the back. The ceremony proceeded according to the printed program Elena had picked up at the entrance. The school choir performed the national anthem, their young voices filling the large space with patriotic harmony that made Maria's heart swell. She had served her country for over a decade, sacrificing time with her family to protect the freedoms that allowed ceremonies like this to take place in peace and safety. Valedictorian speeches followed, delivered by 2 exceptional students who spoke about perseverance, friendship, and the importance of making a positive difference in the world. Maria found herself nodding along with their words, thinking about Alex's own journey through high school. He hadn't been the top student academically, but he had shown remarkable resilience in the face of challenges that would have broken many teenagers. When Alex was 14, Maria had been deployed for 8 months on a classified mission that she still couldn't discuss with anyone outside her former unit. During that time, Alex had struggled with anger and resentment, acting out in ways that worried his teachers and his grandmother. It was Coach Williams who had suggested that Alex channel his energy into basketball, and the sport had become both an outlet for his emotions and a source of discipline that helped him mature. Maria remembered the video call when Alex had told her about making the varsity team. She had been in a temporary command post somewhere in the Middle East, exhausted from a mission that had lasted 36 hours, but his excitement had energized her more than any amount of coffee could have. That was the moment she had begun seriously considering retirement from active duty. Alex needed his mother present, not just available through a satellite connection. The sound of movement drew Maria's attention back to the present. The graduates were filing onto the stage in alphabetical order, and she could see Alex near the middle of the line, his nervous energy visible even from a distance. He caught her eye and smiled, the expression transforming his serious face into something bright and hopeful. But Maria's celebration was interrupted by what she saw in her peripheral vision. The group of men in suits had changed positions. Instead of standing together in the back corner, they had spread out around the gymnasium, positioning themselves at various exits and vantage points. The man with graying temples was now standing near the main entrance, his hand resting inside his jacket in a way that made Maria's blood run cold. These weren't random relatives or school administrators. They were operatives of some kind, and they were taking tactical positions around the graduation ceremony. Maria's mind raced through the possibilities. Were they federal agents investigating something? Private security for a high-profile family? Or something more sinister? She leaned over to her mother. "I need to step outside for a moment. If anything unusual happens, I want you to get under the bleachers and stay there until I come find you." Elena's eyes widened with concern. "Maria, what's wrong? You're scaring me." "Probably nothing," Maria said, trying to keep her voice calm. "But I learned a long time ago to trust my instincts. Just promise me you'll do what I said if things get strange." Elena nodded reluctantly, and Maria slipped out of her seat, moving toward the side exit with the casual confidence of someone who belonged everywhere she went. Her military training had taught her how to blend into any environment while maintaining maximum awareness of potential threats. In the hallway outside the gymnasium, Maria found a position where she could observe the main entrance while remaining largely invisible to the men inside. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts, stopping at a number she hadn't called in over a year. Commander Sarah Mitchell had been Maria's commanding officer during her last deployment, and she now worked in intelligence coordination at the Pentagon. The call connected after 2 rings. Maria Santos, Sarah's voice was warm but surprised. "This is unexpected. How's civilian life treating you?" "Sarah, I need you to run a quick check for me," Maria said, cutting straight to the business that had made them effective partners during their military service. "I'm at my son's high school graduation in Cedar Falls, Ohio, and there are at least 5 men here who are definitely not parents or teachers. They're positioned tactically around the gymnasium, and they're armed." There was a brief pause before Sarah responded, and Maria could hear the sound of typing in the background. "Give me descriptions and I'll run them through facial recognition if possible." Maria provided detailed descriptions of the men she had observed, including clothing, approximate ages, and positioning. While she waited for Sarah to work her magic with the military intelligence databases, Maria continued watching the graduation ceremony through the small windows in the gymnasium doors. Alex was now 3rd in line to receive his diploma. Despite her growing concern about the mysterious operatives, Maria felt a surge of maternal pride as she watched her son step forward when his name was called. Alexander David Santos walked across the stage with confidence, shook hands with Principal Martinez, and accepted his diploma with a smile that could have powered the entire building. "Maria, I've got something," Sarah's voice crackled through the phone. "You're not going to like this. The man you described with the graying temples is Marcus Webb, former CIA operations officer who was dismissed from the agency 3 years ago for unauthorized activities. The others don't show up in our databases, which means they're either completely clean or they're working for someone with the resources to scrub their identities." Maria's grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of unauthorized activities?" "The classified version is above my clearance level, but the rumors suggest he was involved in domestic surveillance operations that violated federal law." "Maria, if Webb is there with a team, they're not following official protocols. This is unsanctioned, which makes it extremely dangerous." The implications hit Maria like a physical blow. An unofficial team of operatives at her son's graduation ceremony could only mean one thing: someone was planning an operation that couldn't withstand legal scrutiny. The question was whether Alex or her family were the targets, or if they were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. "I need to get my son and my mother out of here," Maria said, her voice taking on the clipped efficiency of a soldier receiving orders. "Can you alert local authorities?" "Already working on it, but response time will be at least 15 minutes given the rural location. You're on your own until then." Maria ended the call and moved back toward the gymnasium entrance, her mind shifting into the tactical mode that had kept her alive through countless dangerous missions. The graduation ceremony was still proceeding normally, with students continuing to receive their diplomas, but Maria now saw the event through the lens of a potential threat situation. Webb and his team were waiting for something. They hadn't made any aggressive moves yet, which suggested they were either planning to act during a specific moment in the ceremony, or they were waiting for someone to arrive. Maria counted the civilians in the gymnasium and estimated there were close to 800 people present, including the graduates, their families, and school staff. If this situation went bad, the potential for casualties was enormous. Maria slipped back into the gymnasium and returned to her seat next to Elena, who immediately sensed her daughter's change in demeanor. "What did you find out?" Elena whispered. "We may need to leave quickly," Maria replied quietly. "When I give you the signal, I want you to walk calmly toward the exit near the concession stand. Don't run, don't look back, just walk normally like you're going to the restroom." Elena's face went pale, but she nodded with the same quiet courage that had helped her raise 2 children as a single mother after her husband died in Vietnam. Maria had inherited her strength from this remarkable woman who had never backed down from a challenge. On stage, the last few students were receiving their diplomas. Alex had returned to his seat with his classmates, and Maria could see him scanning the crowd until he found her face. She managed to smile and gave him a small wave, not wanting to alarm him until she better understood what was happening. The graduation ceremony was entering its final phase, with Principal Martinez preparing to give the closing remarks that would officially declare the class of 2024 graduated from Cedar Falls High School. It was a moment that should have been pure celebration for families who had watched their children work for 12 years to reach this milestone. But Maria's attention was focused on Marcus Webb, who had moved closer to the stage and was now speaking urgently into his communication device. Whatever he had been waiting for was apparently about to happen. Maria's hand instinctively moved toward the small tactical knife she kept in her purse, a habit from her military days that she had never quite abandoned. She might be retired from active duty, but she was still a Navy SEAL, and she would protect her family and these innocent civilians from whatever threat Webb and his team represented. The ceremony was about to become something much more dangerous than anyone in that gymnasium could imagine, and Maria Santos was the only person in the building with the training and experience to stop it. As Principal Martinez stepped up to the microphone for his closing speech, Maria prepared for the possibility that her son's graduation day was about to become a battlefield. The calm before the storm was always the most dangerous moment, because it was when enemies revealed their true intentions. Maria had learned this lesson in combat zones around the world, but she had never expected to apply it at a high school graduation ceremony in small-town Ohio. Everything was about to change, and Maria Santos was ready for whatever came next. Principal Martinez's voice echoed through the gymnasium as he began his closing remarks, but Maria's attention was fixed on Marcus Webb, who had positioned himself near the side entrance closest to the stage. His team members had also shifted positions, creating what Maria recognized as a containment formation designed to control movement in and out of the building. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to present to you the graduating class of 2024, Principal Martinez announced, his voice filled with genuine pride. These young men and women have overcome challenges, pursued their dreams, and are now ready to make their mark on the world. The audience erupted in applause and cheers, parents standing to celebrate their children's achievements. Maria remained seated, her eyes tracking Webb's movements as he checked his watch and spoke into his communication device once again. Whatever timeline he was following, it was approaching a critical moment. Elena noticed her daughter's tension and leaned closer. "Maria, you're making me nervous. What exactly do you think is going to happen?" Before Maria could respond, she saw Webb nod to his team members and begin moving toward the stage with deliberate purpose. His hand was now clearly positioned inside his jacket, and Maria's military training told her that he was about to reveal his weapon. The time for passive observation had ended. Maria stood abruptly and turned to her mother. "Go now. Walk toward the concession stand exit, get outside, and call 911. Tell them there are armed men at the school." Elena's eyes widened, but she didn't argue. Years of being married to a soldier and raising a daughter who served in special forces had taught her to trust military instincts without question. She gathered her purse and began moving toward the designated exit with the casual pace Maria had instructed. On stage, Principal Martinez was preparing to give the graduates permission to move their tassels from right to left, the symbolic moment that would officially mark their transition from students to graduates. It was the climax of the ceremony, the moment when hundreds of cameras would flash and families would cheer the loudest. It was also the perfect moment for someone to create maximum chaos and confusion. Webb reached into his jacket and withdrew what appeared to be a federal credentials wallet, but Maria's enhanced vision caught the metallic glint of something else in his other hand. He wasn't here as law enforcement. He was here to disrupt this ceremony for reasons that were about to become terrifyingly clear. "Excuse me," Webb called out, his voice cutting through the celebratory atmosphere like a blade. "I need everyone to remain calm and stay in your seats. This is a matter of national security." The gymnasium fell silent as hundreds of people turned to look at the man who had just interrupted their children's graduation. Principal Martinez stopped mid-sentence, his face showing confusion rather than alarm. The graduates on stage looked around uncertainly, unsure whether this was part of some planned ceremony surprise. Maria began moving through the crowd, using the momentary confusion to position herself between Webb's team and the stage where her son sat with his classmates. Her movements were smooth and purposeful, designed to appear casual to untrained observers while actually following tactical principles that would give her multiple options for response. "Sir, I'm going to need to see some identification," Principal Martinez said into his microphone, his educator's instinct to maintain order overriding any fear he might have felt. "This is a private school ceremony, and you're disrupting an important moment for these families." Webb smiled coldly and held up his credentials wallet, though he was too far from the stage for anyone to actually read it. "Agent Marcus Webb, Department of Homeland Security. We have credible intelligence that there is a security threat at this event. I need everyone to cooperate while we locate and neutralize the threat." Maria felt her blood turn to ice. Webb was using the classic cover story that would give him authority to control the situation while making it difficult for civilians to question his actions. The mention of Homeland Security would make most people comply immediately, especially in a school setting where security concerns were taken seriously. But Maria knew Webb's real background, and she understood that whatever was happening here was not an official government operation. The question was what he was really after and how far he was willing to go to get it. Webb's team members began moving through the crowd, their weapons now visible under their jackets as they herded families toward the center of the gymnasium. Maria noticed that they were being particularly careful to keep people away from the exits, confirming her suspicion that this was some kind of containment operation. "Mom, what's happening?" Alex called out from the stage, his voice carrying clearly in the tense silence. "Who are these people?" Webb's head snapped toward Alex with an intensity that made Maria's protective instincts flare white-hot. Whatever Webb wanted, it somehow involved her son. The realization hit her like a physical blow as pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even known existed began falling into place. Maria's military career had involved dozens of classified missions that she couldn't discuss even with her family. Some of those missions had involved operations against individuals who later proved to have connections to domestic terrorist networks or international criminal organizations. It was possible that someone she had helped capture or eliminate had family members or associates seeking revenge. Or it was possible that Webb himself was connected to one of the unauthorized CIA operations that Sarah had mentioned. If Maria had unknowingly disrupted one of his illegal activities during her military service, he might have spent years planning this moment of revenge. "Alexander Santos," Webb called out, his voice carrying clearly through the gymnasium. "I need you to come down from the stage slowly and walk toward me. Everyone else needs to remain exactly where they are." The blood drained from Alex's face as he realized he was being specifically targeted. Maria watched her son's shoulders square with determination that reminded her so much of his father. David had possessed the same quiet courage that refused to back down when faced with injustice or threat. But Alex was 17 years old and had no training to deal with armed operatives. Whatever bravery he might possess wouldn't be enough to protect him from Webb and his team. Maria had heard enough. Her son was being threatened, innocent families were being terrorized, and she was the only person in the building with the skills and experience to stop it. The time for patience and observation had ended. "Webb!" Maria called out, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to command. "Marcus Webb, formerly of the CIA until you were dismissed for unauthorized domestic operations. Why don't you tell these people what you're really doing here?" Every head in the gymnasium turned toward Maria as she stepped fully into view, no longer attempting to blend into the crowd. Her posture was relaxed but ready, the stance of someone comfortable with confrontation and confident in her abilities. Webb's expression shifted from surprise to recognition to something that looked almost like respect. Maria Santos. Navy SEAL, retired. 12 years of active duty, multiple commendations for classified operations. "I was wondering when you would reveal yourself." "You know who I am," Maria said, continuing to move closer to Webb while keeping her hands visible and non-threatening. "Which means this isn't a random event. You came here specifically because Alex is my son." "Very good," Webb replied. "Your reputation for intelligence gathering was always impressive." "Yes, this is about you, Ms. Santos. Or rather, it's about something you took from me during one of your classified missions." The crowd of families and graduates watched this exchange with growing confusion and fear. Most of them had no idea that the woman they knew as Alex's quiet, polite mother was actually a highly trained special operations veteran. Principal Martinez looked completely out of his depth, still holding his microphone but clearly unsure whether he should be calling for help or trying to maintain order. "I've conducted dozens of missions over my career," Maria said calmly. "You'll have to be more specific about which one involved you." Webb's smile was cold and predatory. "Operation Nightfall. Syria, 18 months ago. You and your team raided a compound that you believed housed terrorist weapons manufacturers. But that compound was actually being used for one of my private operations. You destroyed 3 years of work and cost my associates millions of dollars." Maria's memory clicked into place. Operation Nightfall had been a joint task force mission targeting a network of bomb makers who were supplying explosives to terrorist cells across the Middle East. The intelligence had been solid, and the raid had been successful by every military measure. They had captured valuable intelligence and disrupted what appeared to be a significant terrorist operation. But if Webb was telling the truth, that compound had been running a dual purpose. While it may have housed legitimate terrorist threats, it was also being used for whatever illegal activities Webb had been conducting for his private clients. "If you were running unauthorized CIA operations in Syrian territory, that was your mistake," Maria said. "My team followed legitimate orders based on verified intelligence. We didn't even know you existed." "But you cost me everything," Webb replied, his voice rising with anger. "My operation was dismantled, my contacts were arrested, and my reputation in certain circles was destroyed. I've spent the last 18 months tracking down everyone involved in that raid, and you were the hardest to find." Maria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning in the gymnasium. "What did you do to my team members?" Webb's smile widened. "Nothing permanent. Yet. But they all received visits from my associates. Photos of their children walking to school. Information about their home addresses and daily routines. Just friendly reminders that their past actions have consequences." The implication was clear. Webb had been systematically intimidating the families of Maria's former team members, using the classic terrorist tactic of threatening loved ones to create psychological pressure. It was a coward's approach, targeting innocent civilians to settle grievances that belonged in a military or legal context. "So this is about revenge," Maria said. "You're threatening my son and these families because you're angry about a legitimate military operation that disrupted your illegal activities." "This is about justice," Webb corrected. "You destroyed my life, so I'm going to destroy yours. But I'm not unreasonable. I'm prepared to offer you a choice." Maria's tactical mind was already calculating angles and distances, noting the positions of Webb's team members and assessing the potential for civilian casualties if this situation escalated into violence. The gymnasium was crowded with families, including small children and elderly grandparents who would be unable to move quickly if shooting started. "What kind of choice?" she asked, buying time while she continued her mental preparation. Webb gestured toward Alex, who was still standing on the stage with his classmates. "Your son for the information. I know you copied files from that compound in Syria before you destroyed it. Intelligence reports, financial records, contact lists. I want everything your team downloaded during the raid." Maria's heart sank as she realized Webb was right. Standard operating procedure for raids like Operation Nightfall included comprehensive data collection. Every computer, every file cabinet, every electronic device in the compound had been copied before the site was destroyed. That information was now stored in classified military databases that Maria no longer had access to. "I don't have access to classified files anymore," Maria said. "I'm retired." "But you have contacts who do," Webb replied. "Commander Sarah Mitchell at the Pentagon, for example. I'm sure she would be willing to help if she knew your son's life depended on it." The mention of Sarah's name confirmed that Webb had been planning this operation for months, possibly longer. He had researched Maria's background thoroughly, identifying her family members, her close military contacts, and the leverage points that could be used to force her cooperation. "Even if I could get the files,
What makes you think I would trust you to honor any agreement? Maria asked.
You're a rogue operative who has already threatened innocent families.
Your word means nothing. Webb's expression hardened.
Because the alternative is watching your son die in front of 800 witnesses.
My team has clear orders to eliminate Alex if you don't cooperate. The choice is simple: get me the files, or lose your son.
The gymnasium erupted in gasps and cries of alarm as Webb's threat registered with the civilian audience. Parents instinctively moved to shield their own children, and several people began crying. Principal Martinez dropped his microphone, which hit the floor with a loud crash that echoed through the large space.
But Maria's focus remained laser-sharp on Webb and his team.
She had faced similar ultimatums during her military career, situations where terrorists or enemy combatants attempted to use hostages or threats against civilians to force military compliance. The standard response was always the same: never negotiate with terrorists, because giving in to their demands only encouraged future attacks. The difference was that this time, her own son was the target. Alex stepped forward on the stage, his young voice carrying clearly through the gymnasium.
Mom, don't give them anything.
These people are criminals, and you can't trust them no matter what they promise. Maria's heart swelled with pride and terror in equal measure. Alex was showing the same moral courage that had defined his father, the same refusal to compromise with evil even when facing personal danger. But his bravery was also putting him in greater peril.
Webb turned his attention back to Alex with obvious irritation.
You should teach your son when to keep his mouth shut, Ms. Santos.
Heroes tend to die young in situations like this.
That was the moment Maria Santos stopped being a concerned mother and became a Navy SEAL again. Webb's threat against her son had crossed every line that mattered to her, and his casual mention of violence against a teenager had triggered the protective instincts that had been honed by years of combat experience. Maria's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, her weight moving to the balls of her feet as she prepared for action. Her breathing deepened and slowed, and her vision sharpened as adrenaline flooded her system. Around the gymnasium, Webb's team members continued controlling the crowd, but Maria could see subtle flaws in their positioning that could be exploited by someone with her training. You made a mistake coming here, Webb, Maria said, her voice taking on the cold efficiency that her former team members would have recognized immediately.
You thought you could intimidate a retired soldier and her family.
But you forgot something important about Navy SEALs. Webb's confidence flickered for the first time since he had revealed himself.
What's that?
Maria smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression.
We never really retire. We just wait for the next mission to find us.
The graduation ceremony was about to become a battlefield, but this time, Maria Santos was fighting on her home ground to protect the people she loved most. Webb had chosen the wrong mother to threaten, and he was about to learn why Navy SEALs were considered the most elite warriors in the world. The storm was about to break, and Maria was ready to remind everyone in that gymnasium why some people should never be underestimated. The tension in the gymnasium was electric as Maria Santos faced down Marcus Webb and his team of rogue operatives. 800 civilians sat frozen in their seats, trapped between a group of armed men and a woman whose military background was only now becoming apparent to most of them. The graduation ceremony that should have been a celebration of achievement had become a hostage situation with stakes none of them could have imagined. Webb gestured to one of his men, who began moving toward the stage where Alex and his classmates waited. The operative's hand rested on his concealed weapon, making his intentions clear. If Maria didn't comply with Webb's demands within the next few minutes, her son would pay the price for her resistance. But Maria had spent 12 years learning to function under extreme pressure, and she had never lost a mission or failed to protect innocent lives. She wasn't about to start now, especially when her son's life hung in the balance. Before we go any further, Maria said, her voice carrying clearly through the gymnasium, I want everyone here to understand what's really happening. These men are not federal agents. They're criminals led by a former CIA operative who was dismissed for illegal activities. They have no legal authority to be here, and they're threatening your children to settle a personal grudge.
Webb's expression darkened. That's enough, Santos. You're only making this harder on everyone. Am I? Maria replied. Because I think these families deserve to know the truth about what they're caught up in.
You see, Mr. Webb here is angry because my military team disrupted one of his unauthorized operations in Syria 18 months ago. We were following legitimate orders to stop terrorist bomb makers, but apparently Webb was using the same facility for his own profitable activities. Several parents in the audience began murmuring among themselves, and Maria could see understanding dawning on faces throughout the crowd. They were beginning to realize that this wasn't some random terrorist attack or security threat.
It was a personal vendetta being played out at their children's graduation ceremony.
Principal Martinez, who had been standing frozen on the stage, suddenly found his voice. Mr. Webb, I don't know what kind of dispute you have with Ms. Santos, but you have no right to threaten these students.
I'm ordering you to leave this building immediately. Webb laughed coldly. You're in no position to order anything, Principal. But I admire your courage in trying to protect your students. Unfortunately, courage won't help you if you interfere with what needs to happen here.
That was the moment Maria had been waiting for. Webb's attention was divided between threatening her, watching his team members, and responding to Principal Martinez's challenge. In combat, such moments of divided focus were called opportunity windows, and Maria had learned to recognize and exploit them with lethal efficiency. She moved with the fluid speed that had made her one of the most effective Navy SEALs in her unit. Her first target was the operative closest to the stage, the one who posed the most immediate threat to Alex and the other graduates. Maria covered 20 feet in less than 3 seconds, her approach silent and precisely angled to avoid giving Webb's other team members clear shots. The operative near the stage sensed movement and began to turn, his hand reaching for his weapon. But Maria was already inside his defensive perimeter, her military training giving her multiple options for disabling an armed opponent at close range. She chose the most efficient method, a precise strike to the pressure point on his neck that cut off blood flow to his brain. The man dropped silently to the floor, unconscious before he understood what had happened to him. Maria immediately retrieved his weapon and positioned herself between the stage and Webb's remaining team members.
Nobody move!
Webb shouted, his own weapon now drawn and pointed in Maria's direction.
I said nobody move. But the gymnasium was no longer under Webb's control.
The sight of Maria disabling one of the armed men had galvanized the civilian audience, and people began moving toward the exits despite Webb's orders. Parents grabbed their younger children and headed for the doors, while older students started helping their grandparents navigate the crowded rows of chairs. Let them go, Webb, Maria called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. Your quarrel is with me, not with these families.
You want those files from Syria? Fine. Let's discuss terms.
But first, you're going to let every civilian in this building walk out safely. Webb's team was now spread too thin to maintain control of the crowd. 2 of his men were trying to block the main exits, but they couldn't stop 800 people who were determined to escape. Another operative was moving to flank Maria's position, but he had to navigate through fleeing families, which slowed his progress and made it difficult for him to get a clear shot.
You think you're in control here?
Webb snarled. You're outnumbered 4-1, and my men have your son's classmates pinned down on that stage. One word from me, and they start shooting teenagers. Maria glanced toward the stage where Alex and his classmates were crouched behind the podium and decorative backdrop. Her son caught her eye and nodded once, a silent communication that he understood what she needed him to do. Alex had grown up hearing stories about his mother's military service, and while he didn't know the specific details of her training, he understood that she needed him to trust her completely.
Alex! Maria called out.
When I say now, you and everyone on that stage need to get down flat and stay down until I tell you it's safe. Webb realized what Maria was planning and began moving toward the stage himself, his weapon raised and ready to fire.
Don't even think about it, Santos.
I will shoot that boy if you try anything heroic. But Maria had already committed to her course of action. She had spent years training for exactly this type of situation: multiple armed hostiles, civilian casualties at risk, limited backup, and overwhelming odds against success. The key to winning such scenarios was speed, precision, and the willingness to take calculated risks that would terrify most people.
Now! Maria shouted.
Alex and his classmates dropped to the stage floor just as Maria launched herself toward Webb's position. She moved in a zigzag pattern that made her a difficult target while closing the distance between them as quickly as possible. Webb fired twice, but his shots went wide as Maria's unpredictable movement pattern threw off his aim. The sound of gunfire in the enclosed gymnasium was deafening, and the remaining civilians screamed and ducked for cover. But Maria was already inside Webb's defensive range, using the same close-quarters combat techniques that had kept her alive in hostile territory around the world. Webb was skilled and experienced, but he had spent the last 3 years working as a private contractor rather than maintaining the peak physical conditioning required for hand-to-hand combat. Maria, on the other hand, had never stopped training. Even in retirement, she ran 5 miles every morning and spent 2 hours each day practicing the martial arts techniques that were second nature to every Navy SEAL. The fight was brief and decisive. Maria disarmed Webb with a wrist control technique that sent his weapon skittering across the gymnasium floor, then followed up with a combination of strikes that left him stunned and unable to continue fighting. Within 30 seconds, the man who had terrorized hundreds of innocent people was lying unconscious on the floor beside his own gun. But Maria couldn't celebrate yet. Webb's remaining team members were still armed and dangerous, and they would likely attempt to complete their mission even without their leader. She retrieved Webb's weapon and moved toward the nearest operative, a younger man who was trying to maintain control of one of the exit doors. "Drop your weapon," Maria commanded, her military training making her voice carry absolute authority. "Your leader is down, your operation has failed, and local law enforcement is already on the way. You have one chance to surrender peacefully." The operative looked between Maria, his unconscious leader, and the crowd of witnesses who were now documenting everything with their cell phone cameras. Maria could see him calculating his options and realizing that continuing to fight would only make his legal situation worse. He slowly raised his hands and placed his weapon on the floor. "I surrender." "Kick the weapon away from you and get down on your knees," Maria ordered. "Hands behind your head." The operative complied, and Maria moved toward the next team member. The psychological effect of seeing their leader defeated and one of their colleagues surrender was evident on the faces of Webb's remaining men. They had signed up to intimidate a retired soldier and her family, not to engage in a firefight with someone who possessed elite military training. One by one, the remaining operatives chose surrender over resistance. Within 10 minutes of the first gunshot, all of Webb's team members were disarmed and restrained, waiting for the arrival of legitimate law enforcement officers who would place them under arrest for terrorism, kidnapping, and multiple weapons violations. The graduation ceremony that had been interrupted by threats and violence was finally secure. Maria made her way to the stage where Alex and his classmates were still taking cover behind the decorative backdrop. Her son looked up as she approached, his face showing a mixture of pride, relief, and awe. "Is it over?" Alex asked quietly. "It's over," Maria confirmed, kneeling beside him and pulling him into a fierce embrace. "Everyone is safe." Principal Martinez emerged from behind the podium where he had taken cover during the firefight. His face was pale and his hands were shaking, but his voice was steady as he spoke into the microphone that had somehow remained functional throughout the chaos. "Ladies and gentlemen, the immediate threat has been neutralized thanks to the heroic actions of Maria Santos. Emergency responders are on their way to ensure everyone receives any medical attention they might need. For now, please remain calm while we verify that the building is completely secure." As if summoned by his words, the sound of sirens filled the air outside the gymnasium. Within minutes, the building was swarming with police officers, FBI agents, and paramedics who began the process of securing the scene and taking statements from witnesses. Elena Santos appeared at Maria's side, having returned to the gymnasium despite her daughter's instructions to stay outside. Her face was streaked with tears, but her expression was fierce with maternal pride. "I saw part of it through the window," Elena said, embracing both Maria and Alex simultaneously. "I have never been more proud of you in my entire life, Mija." Commander Sarah Mitchell arrived with the FBI response team, having coordinated the federal response from her position at the Pentagon. She found Maria sitting with her family in the corner of the gymnasium, giving her statement to a federal agent while Alex and Elena provided moral support. "I should have known you'd handle this yourself," Sarah said with a mixture of admiration and exasperation. "Most people would have waited for backup." "Most people don't have a son who was being threatened," Maria replied. "Besides, you taught me to use the resources available." "I was the only resource available." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Webb and his team are going to prison for a very long time. The evidence we've gathered shows this was part of a larger pattern of revenge attacks against military personnel who interfered with his illegal operations. Your actions today probably saved other families from going through similar experiences." As the immediate crisis was resolved and the formal investigation began, the reality of what had happened started to sink in for everyone involved. The class of 2024 graduation ceremony had become something that none of them would ever forget, but perhaps not for the reasons they had originally hoped. Alex looked at his mother with new understanding of who she was and what she had sacrificed during her military career. "Mom, all those times you were deployed when I was younger, you were protecting people like you protected everyone today, weren't you?" Maria nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Every mission, every deployment, every day away from you was about making sure families like ours could live in safety. I never wanted you to see that side of my life, but I'm glad you understand now why it was important." Principal Martinez approached their small group, still looking somewhat shell-shocked but determined to address what had happened. "Ms. Santos, I owe you an apology. I've known you for 4 years as Alex's mother, but I never knew about your military background. If I had understood who you were, I would have." "You would have done exactly what you did today," Maria interrupted gently. "You tried to protect your students with the tools available to you. That's what good leaders do, whether they're school principals or Navy SEALs." As the evening wore on and the initial chaos subsided, an unexpected decision was made by the school administration and the graduating class. Despite the traumatic interruption, the students voted unanimously to complete their graduation ceremony. They had worked 12 years to reach this moment, and they refused to let criminals steal it from them. 2 hours after the last of Webb's team members had been arrested, the class of 2024 reconvened on the stage of their gymnasium. Principal Martinez once again stepped up to the microphone, but this time his words carried a weight and meaning that none of them had anticipated when the day began. "Today, you witnessed something that most people will never see in their entire lives," he told the graduates. "You saw what it means to stand up for what's right, even when doing so requires tremendous personal courage. You saw a mother's love translated into protective action that saved countless lives. And you demonstrated your own character by choosing to complete this ceremony despite everything that happened earlier." Alex Santos walked across the stage to receive his diploma for the second time that day, but now the moment carried additional significance that would stay with him for the rest of his life. As he shook Principal Martinez's hand and posed for photos with his mother and grandmother, he understood that graduation wasn't just about completing high school. It was about being ready to face whatever challenges the world might present. Maria watched her son with tears in her eyes, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. The military career that had taken her away from him for so many important events had also given her the skills to protect him when it mattered most. The sacrifices they had both made during her years of service had been vindicated in the most dramatic way possible. As the ceremony concluded with the traditional tassel turning and cap throwing, Maria Santos realized that her most important mission had finally been completed successfully. She had served her country with honor, protected innocent lives, and raised a son who understood the difference between right and wrong. Webb and his team would spend many years in federal prison, their plans for revenge forever thwarted by the courage of a woman who refused to be intimidated. The families who had attended the graduation ceremony would never forget the day they witnessed a real American hero in action. And Alex Santos would carry the memory of his mother's strength and dedication with him as he began the next chapter of his own life. The graduation ceremony that had begun as a celebration of academic achievement had become something much more profound, a demonstration of the values that make communities strong and the courage that keeps freedom alive. In a world where heroes often seem like fictional characters, everyone in that gymnasium had witnessed the real thing. Maria Santos had shown them what it looked like when someone who had sworn to protect and defend actually lived up to those words, regardless of the personal cost. She had proven that some people never stop serving their country and their communities, even after their official duty has ended. The ceremony was over, but the lesson would last a lifetime.